The Australian Curriculum Studies Association would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and the waterways from where we are all meeting today. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We value the contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to education and their continued support of the teaching and learning of all Australians. We recognise that for thousands of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been the first teachers, and that we are committed to continue our learning alongside them. Welcome back, everyone, to ACSA Insights. We are delighted to have you back. Now, we have just recently had our annual general meeting, and we are so lucky because we have some new executive committee members. And so it only seems appropriate that we get to introduce you. Now, my first executive committee member who's just joined us is Alex Wharton. So we are delighted to have him on board, and he has got extensive teaching and leadership experience from P to 12 across both metropolitan and country New South Wales. He's had a role as a head teacher, a head of middle school, and a school principal. So a lot of skill sets that he will bring to our board. Now, he's now been appointed as a curriculum writer, so right up our street, and is regularly approached by government and not-for-profit organisations to design relevant and engaging curriculum materials for broad audiences. He's been the recipient of the New South Wales Premier's Teaching Scholarship, a Commonwealth Bank Schools Plus Fellowship, which is where I know him from, and numerous other awards for his work around English curriculum and literacy education. Most excitedly, he is also branching not only into curriculum and practice, but also the evidence behind curriculum, and is engaged in a PhD at the Western Sydney University for researching media literacy education. So welcome, Alex.
Thanks so much,
How
Anna.
are you?
Great to see you, and I feel like listening to that, it's crazy, but also at the same time, I want to carry you around in my back pocket to be my cheerleader for when I have a bad
I
day
am.
or get discouraged, yes, from the hurly burly of life. So thanks so much. Great to chat.
Oh, well, it's wonderful to have this conversation, but just a little, I think we'll start off with the question that actually is so for some of us has to go quite a long way back, but others might not be. And I think probably it's something that we probably hold in our hearts for quite a period of time. And it really is that motivation. And what were your motivations for getting into the education sector?
Yeah, look, it does go way back for me. Actually, as a child, I remember playing games and playing teacher at home. It's something I watch my own children do now,
Yes.
ironically. So kind of there was something certainly of education and love of learning in my family,
Yeah.
but there was a real clincher for me in secondary school, in high school, where I had an amazing teacher who had a significant impact on me, and we might talk about her later in my interview
Mm.
as well with you, Anna. But essentially, kind of, she was a history teacher, ancient history in particular, and she kind of opened up a world through learning in the past that I kind of didn't know existed until really year 11. And being a young teenage boy as well, I felt like my brain was only slowly warming up towards the end of secondary school, if I'm honest. And I can
Yeah.
reflect back on that and see that in my reports. And so to have a teacher who kind of helped me think about ideas of democracy, of having your voice, of standing up for what you believe in, of your place in society and the world, that was through the history classroom. And I had an amazing learning community of peers. We cheered each other on and challenged each other. And so for me, kind of this opened up all these benefits of a job and a profession and a vocation, which I hadn't necessarily thought about before, because previously I'd always wanted to do things in media and communications actually,
Yes.
and was really interested in that route. But I hadn't thought of education until I had that significant turning point in my education journey to enter the profession and give back and be involved in making a difference in the lives of others.
Oh, it's lovely. And it's one of those weird things, education, isn't it? Because it's probably the first profession that we ever get in kind of sort of involved in because we have it ourselves. So we've seen the teachers. They're our first role models that we get into. And, I think we see that for a lot of young people making big decisions about their future based on maybe just a little bit of knowledge and information is a really tricky space. So we're
Yeah,
lucky as teachers that we've been in there. We can see other teachers and
that's
we've really
right.
been embedding teaching and learning from
That's
the
right.
moment we step into a kindy classroom.
That's so true.
Um,
And can I say, in light of just
mm,
reflecting back to you on that as
yeah,
well, I always say that to students, kind of obviously in the primary and secondary space as well as early childhood having that value of play and discovery and inquiry. But in primary and secondary schools where students do all those different key learning areas and all those different
yes,
curricula, and saying to them, what do you love? What do you connect with? And how in secondary can you go into that elective space and really choose things that you're interested in, tap into? But of course, school's only such a formative, but also, limited part of their life. We want to encourage lifelong learners. And I do think being exposed to as much as we can at school through curriculum, of course, is a really important part of that. And there's exciting things that are happening and are around
yeah,
micro credentialing for school
yes,
students, around mini courses and those
yeah,
opportunities for our young learners to, yeah, tap into all these
yeah.
opportunities now and ahead of the future is exciting.
And there's a little taster into that space before you make that big leap. And I think
Absolutely.
that's the shift we've seen in education. There's lots of shifts we see, but I think even I know even when I was there, there was a very set way of understanding the professions, and you would go in and it was for the long term, and that kind of flexibility to move between things was actually quite difficult. Whereas now we're
Mhm.
seeing more, I think, people looking at skill sets rather than your knowledge framework, and that's obviously
So true.
something as a curriculum in our space,
Yes, yes.
we're having to really adopt that, and look at what that means. Um, but if we're thinking about your career so far, what have you seen as probably one of your greatest accomplishments? And I'm sure there's many because I know you very well.
That
But
is so
what
nice.
do you think?
Look, your introduction and bios kind of highlighted some amazing things, and I've been able to
Mm,
be exposed to some international professional learning opportunities,
mm,
some study tours and fellowships, like all career defining and highlights, absolutely. Um, and now in my kind of current context, where I'm kind of researching, pursuing academia, I actually reflect back on some of my real greatest accomplishments and are kind of in the classroom in lots of ways, engaging with a disengaged student, helping someone who felt a bit voiceless to find their voice through a poem, having a bad lesson on a Friday afternoon and walking out of school and thinking, that this was a failure and you're reconsidering kind of all your options. And then someone comes up and says, thanks, sir, that was a really great, I actually really enjoyed what you had to say today. Or those kind of moments I look back now and think, well, it's not so much about the titles or the awards, although that's a huge honor and
yeah.
humbling. It's these actually kind of other moments which are incredibly humbling. They're often unexpected, and
Mm,
they're symbols of trust, Anna, in terms of you as a
mm,
professional and your role in society and in the community. So I really actually value those individual interactions,
yes.
those more quiet behind the scenes. Yeah, as something I really kind of look at a huge accomplishment and something to be proud of as well.
And yeah, I love the way you've honed in on that because this was something that I was wrapping my head around after a children's sport game on the weekend, and that kind of pressure that as a teacher or as a coach, what your aim is. And I think we can get caught up in various ways of the data and looking at things and feeling that the success of the children is our success in the terms of I've done well because I've got the kids to the grade, or I've done really well because the kids won the league or whatever it was. And I think intrinsically as teachers, it's not about that. It's actually,
Mm,
even if we come bottom of the league or we get some of the worst results, if every child feels that they want to be there every lesson and is
mm.
engaged in something, then that for me would be far greater success. And I think sometimes that's a hard mindset to get into. So
It
when you're talking
is.
about some of those children who've been there and you say, oh, they've had a good day, those are actually the moments we work for, I think, as teachers, and we
So
get the
true.
greatest success.
That is so true. And that's something we got to remind ourselves and each other of because we're a part of a bigger system, of course, that's got anything from
Mm,
rankings and competition to results
yeah.
driven. But actually, Anna, exactly what you said. And one of the practical strategies I love in my email inbox, I use folders, right?
Mm.
And I actually have a
Oh,
little folder called a happy file. So when I get that lovely
oh,
parent email out of the blue, or I've done something that's gone well or unexpected, or there might be kind of, yeah, just some encouragement or compliment, I'll actually file that away. And that's
yes.
like my most prized place in my busy inbox where I can click on that and pull up something and it
Yeah,
will give me a lift. Yeah, it's really special.
yeah. And I think that is something that reaffirming from children, as you discussed about, the awards, and I think they're beautiful and our profession acknowledging us, but sometimes the real key message is that our stakeholders are our students. Now, reflection is something that is quite tricky. And, I think you and I have been on a specific journey where we've been allowed that luxury, especially working with mentors, who I'm a huge fan of. But reflection is something that really is a luxury. And if you look about, so far in your career, is there something you may have done differently? And how do you think you would have gone about it?
Yeah, look, reflection and
Mhm.
and leadership and that space and that role of putting yourself out there, I think really is so important to have the time and space to
Yeah.
reflect daily on ourselves. We do that as classroom practitioners, as leaders, as writers, as people engaged in curriculum, of course. And I remember being a leader early on as a middle leader, in kind of a head of school position or as a head teacher, and being confronted with a situation where I needed to kind of have all the answers, or I felt like I did. And so I made a
Yeah.
decision. I felt like that's what I needed to do, was make a call and then stick by that. And of course, hindsight and reflection, that beautiful word you used, which is drilled into
Mhm.
pre-service teachers, of
Mhm.
course, the importance there. I'd actually been able to say, actually, the call that I made at the time wasn't the right one.
Mhm.
It wasn't actually about having all the answers and making that decision. It was actually probably about creating space for others' expertise and me being
Yeah.
comfortable with that as a middle leader.
Yes.
Where you're kind of in this really interesting space of leadership, leading others, reporting to senior peers, of course, and colleagues. And so I just think, okay, had I not run through that particular policy change,
Mm.
had more time to consult, more
Yeah.
time to, yeah, just kind of slow down and listen, I think I'd be able to look back and then say I was actually then building change with people and not for them. And I just think, yeah, there's something in that nature of stopping and
Yeah.
reflecting and creating space for yourself to have those moments of reflection and growth as well.
Yeah, and that that is huge. Even I think from talking about curriculum and pedagogical approaches, our pedagogies change over a period of time. We look at something, we think, oh, this is the best way. It's got, whether it's been an explicit model or someone has
Yes.
sold them that product versus the inquiry, and we kind of put things in boxes when actually that lovely time frame of going and saying that worked there, so I can implement elements of that, and that's how I become a good teacher and lead and see other examples, definitely. But talking about this, obviously we are the Curriculum Association. What does curriculum mean to you, because you're really in that space?
Yeah, very much so. Like really interested in curriculum, and I've done lots of different projects of curriculum and resource writing, from government for not for profit to kind of obviously school and wider group level. And I come back to the fact that curriculum is much more than a document, Anna. It's more than
Hmm.
a set of outcomes that's on a
Yes.
page. And I kind of come across this metaphor some time ago, which is an English teacher I really resonated with, which is kind of the idea of curriculum is a conversation.
Yes.
Um, it can be well defined and documented and formalized, of course, but it's a conversation between the teacher, the student, and the community. And so,
Yes.
kind of like looking at curriculum as almost this bridge between what society values and thinks should be taught, but then that's not all, because you've got the needs of the next generation, you've got what the teacher expertise and input
Mm.
is, of course. So I come back to this idea that it's, yeah, not just words on a page. It's not just content, but it's creativity and context and autonomy and critical thinking
Yeah.
and all these amazing ideas actually all interwoven together. And then, of course, the teacher breathes life into this amazing conversation. The students imbue it with their
Yeah.
perspectives. Parents can access it and engage with it. And of course, we're seeing a rise of homeschooling in Australia. And so
Yes, definitely.
to, to think about curriculum as a broader conversation, I think is at the heart of, yeah, of
Mm.
this. But like I said, it's still got the critical thinking. It's still rigorous and got
Yes.
experts and that academic underpinning. But it's
Mm.
all of these voices contributing to the conversation as well and being valued.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. This kind of the static noun kind of thing that we put as curriculum, and this is it, and it's a box, and um, this is how you have to enact it. But the way you describe the complexities that surround curriculum
That's
and the
right.
interpretation of curriculum, and even we see that just between states and territories, that
Exactly.
level. And
Exactly.
then for the luxury as well, that maybe we can go outside of Australia, talking about that, about the homeschooling.
So
A lot of
true.
other states have been doing, a lot of the countries are doing it, and they had a very different approach when it came to COVID. And I think we've learned a lot from that space. And I think there's probably a lot of growth that we can look to do that.
That's right. And I look at behind you, those beautiful display that you've curated
Yeah.
there. Curriculum is flexible, it's changing. And if it is printed in hard copy, NESA, like in New South Wales, they don't do hard copy syllabus documents and curriculum documents. It's all digital, all on the website. But
Yeah.
when we do get hard copies, or we look at archival studies of how, the particular primary math syllabus has changed over the number of decades, like those documents are reflective of the pedagogy and the research and the
Yes.
knowledge at the time. And so you still appreciate them for what they are. But again, that flexibility and that dynamism, I think, is part of what we're talking about as well today.
And exactly what you were saying there, the documentation, I think sometimes we forget as teachers that we're all different learners. We make all these accommodations for our own students
So
in our
true.
classroom, but sometimes as adults, we're given massive amounts of reading literature, which actually, I know personally, I find that quite difficult. And I know that a lot of people are turning into things like podcasts or audiobooks to access things. And I know, through the fellowship that I did with yourself, being able to mentor someone who did lots of graphics and sketches for me was fabulous, because I actually understood pedagogy in a different framework. So I think that is something we often don't give ourselves enough credit for our own profession, to practice what we're preaching to others, actually support one another in a different way. But it's one element. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, Anna, on the back of that, there is we haven't mentioned AI yet, and
Yes.
I forget what it's called. I think it's Notebook IM or LM. If you haven't heard about that, but essentially, if it's what I'm thinking of, there's an AI tool, Anna, basically, and I put my journal articles, my academic journal articles for the PhD and others into it, and it creates it into a podcast using AI, where you've got two essentially individuals talking about it. So it reads all the content and it makes it engaging. I forget exactly the name. I think it's Notebook LM or something like that. But if you put it into Google, and it just, as I guess that comes back to your point about the nature of learning and curriculum not being static but being flexible, and an opportunity, I wanted to share that as well.
And as you were saying, which we talked about at the beginning, that conversation, which is, I think what we really need to engage in. Now, we're sort of we really are, the AI you've just mentioned there, we are looking at an exponential growth in the changing landscape of education. What do you think are currently some of the biggest challenges we're facing?
Yeah, look, AI is this kind of double-edged sword in some ways. Colleagues will purport and say it's there to help our workload. Someone else would say it's there to double our workload, because the content you get then has to be edited, curated, and by the time you've done that work yourself, it's a part taking away that own kind of critical autonomy and adding more time. But I do think teacher workload's been ongoing for the profession for a long time, and I think remains. I think the focus and the time pressures have just shifted a little bit in terms of that technology. There's a new anti-bullying policy that's announced today by the federal government, Anna. And I think like student wellbeing continues to be on the national agenda and international agenda, and that of course is linked with academic performance. It's linked with student behavior. So teacher workload, student wellbeing, and the other kind of comment I'd make as well is just around the rapid pace and change of social change and technological change in society, and how that trickles down and influences schools. So I think educators at all levels, from tertiary to prep and early learning, are very much impacted by kind of this nature of equity, and how as an education profession, as a curriculum profession, we're engaging with this concept when we've got, that teacher workload, we've got that student wellbeing challenges, and we've got this kind of rapid social change, and how that's actually playing out for individuals, for communities. As someone who lives not in a metropolitan city, I think this is an ongoing challenge that's going to continue to move kind of in this perfect storm, if you like, always kind of moving forward, but still quite messy. Things are being lost and missed, and it's a really challenging time, I think, to be in education, to have more exposure and visibility. But also, there's never been a greater time to get your hands dirty, metaphorically, in the work of teaching and education, and engaging with critical literature and teaching that as well.
Yes, and I think what you're right in saying, this social media pressure, or just in general this pressure, doesn't do our profession a good service, in the sense that the negativity that comes out, that we've got an old system that is not currently working, that we need to change the system, and I think that's really difficult for teachers, because sometimes they feel the system's not working, but their ability to change a system as one person is very difficult. So, in general, I think teachers are beautiful in the sense that they embrace change. They want something to change. They want new things. They want new ideas. But unfortunately, often systems do fail us. But it doesn't
Mm,
help our well-being and our support when other people are criticizing a system that we're really trying hard to work in. So
that's
yeah,
right.
I think that's a really big part that we need to address. But
Can I say on the
mm,
back of that, because I love this conversation, Dr. Nicole Mockler from the
yeah,
University of Sydney did an amazing meta-analysis where she looked at a whole bunch of media headlines around teaching
mm,
and the education profession, and the wider kind of overwhelming majority was kind of either negative headlines, critical headlines, not
yes,
valuing and appreciating the work of teachers. And that's kind of like wider generational issues and
yes.
societal issues, but it's in this bigger concoction of the perfect storm kind of that we alluded to earlier. But I just wanted to acknowledge, yeah, that nature of rhetoric in media and
Yeah.
wider criticisms as well.
Yeah, and and we talk about, the change in the workload, but a lot of that is difficult. But what is difficult is our confidence, and we need to know that we're doing that job, and that sort of relies on leadership or those in those positions, which again is a really heavy load for leaders to carry as well. So we desperately want more teachers, and we are seeing this exodus, which is so sad. Some of the statistics are really quite disappointing in how many people leave the profession for various reasons we discussed. But what advice would you give to a graduate who's starting first year, maybe their second year, and how to maintain staying in it for as long as they can?
Yeah, look, we do want them to stay. There's no greater job than being a teacher. There's no greater profession and calling
Mm,
for than education and making a difference with young people. Um, you acknowledge those statistics, and they've been there for some time in terms of
yeah,
poor attrition. But also more recently, we are seeing an increase in teacher education enrollments. That's got obviously take
yes,
a couple of years to trickle in. And there's kind of other profession-wide changes that are happening, Anna, in terms of,
yeah,
paid prac placements, for example,
yes,
um, kind of increased scholarships from federal government. But I think we want more teachers. You've articulated this. Our profession wants and needs that. We need it for the next generation, of course. This isn't a job that can be replaced by AI or is under threat
no,
because of the nature of the human connection and impact. And I really would say to anyone thinking about this, to pre-service teachers, to kind of keep curious, stay with that
yeah,
curiosity of wanting to learn, of wanting to think what makes a great lesson, to how can I make an
mm,
impact on someone.
yeah,
Because as soon as we start to focus on results, on the ticker boxes, on the procedures and processes, um, we kind of go in that idea of that I've got to know everything, which was one of my big leadership flaws or reflections earlier. If you remember,
yeah,
we don't have to know everything. So
no,
pre-service teachers, like, learn alongside your students. The age of the sage on the stage is long
yeah,
gone.
yeah,
You mentioned mentoring, Anna, like being in your
yes,
professional network, find a mentor who
yeah,
challenges you for those pre-service teachers. Hold on to joy, hold on to those happy file in your inbox
yeah,
of those great moments. Write your notes to yourself, do your
yes,
voice memos of your great
yeah,
lesson and how you're feeling now to play back, because it's easy to get lost in markings and meetings and that widened rhetoric of the profession in the media we talked about earlier.
yeah,
But those moments, the greatest accomplishments for me, like I said, when a student gets it, is
yeah,
actually really what sustains you. And I think encourage pre-service teachers and people considering education to be focusing and thinking about all those richness, because out of the 2,000 interactions plus that a teacher has on a daily basis, there'll be hundreds and hundreds of those that will be heart lifting, encouraging, joyful, funny, um,
yes.
and so worthwhile.
Definitely. And I love when you mentioned about mentoring because I think I came in quite late into that framework or that mindset. And I think it's quite important for graduate teachers to look beyond their environment or their school. And, I think we're both testament to the fact that we were allowed that kind of space to connect with others who are in a different place and a different time and different levels of experience. And I think you get more in that sense because somebody is seeing you for a different perspective. I think
Yeah,
sometimes in a school we get caught up, and it can be negative space if everyone is feeling under the pressure. And
that's
so
right.
then to give somebody a lot of time or to give them that moment of boosting their confidence, whatever it is, can also be quite difficult. Whereas when you're in a different, looking outside of your sphere, it's actually a really lovely, positive place.
Mm,
And I think networking is really now a very important part of our career. But
mm.
it's really good because we actually get to take that lens and look outside of the box and see who's on the watch list, who is making those waves in education that we're holding on to. Have you got any in sort of your area of expertise that you think, oh, this is where change is going to happen?
Yeah, can I mention Ms. Anna Ritzema, the Executive
Yes.
Officer of Australian Curriculum Studies
Wow.
Association?
I'm
Look,
moving and shaking.
I think, this idea of, who's making a difference is really interesting because in kind of the wider professional networks, there are always going to be colleagues, whether they be academics, individuals, school principals who are like really we look up to them, and
Yes.
we have kind of teacher goals, right? Or we have leader goals. And I think that's so important, whether that be in our own school. And, the listeners here and people watching can reflect on those individuals, reach out to those, let them know that you look up to them as well. I also think, Anna, like part of this conversation is people making a difference, like the role of teacher researchers here. So anyone who's willing to take a risk and try and say, can I apply for some action research? Is there a university in your area that you could partner with, perhaps to, trial more around this particular pedagogy, or review the value of explicit teaching, or look at the work of Aero, these kind of federal government research organizations, whatever it might be, kind of looking at how we can kind of be learning and be influenced, and then kind of contextualize it. Of course, you don't ever take anything and say the one size box fits all. The other thing, Anna, we mentioned like pre-service teachers, and there's a lot of pre-service teachers who might have been teaching for a little while now, who are finishing their degree while they're studying because of the nature of way that the regulations in different states and territories have finished. And I kind of think young educators who are like using digital platforms to connect with each other, to collaborate with each other, ones that don't get the public airtime at the big keynote speaking conferences, those colleagues who might be quietly working away and doing amazing stuff. I've worked with hundreds of those sorts of teachers before, and I think they're the ones that I think we want to be celebrating. So, definitely the awards out there, they're going to always be having a high quality. They're rigorous, they're peer reviewed, of course. But I also think you kind of got, these amazing teacher researchers and, your humble school librarians who are really quite a unique position in their school to lead programs and implement change, and kind of those more unofficial leaders making a difference.
Definitely. And I love the fact you've referenced there about, the people who are doing the research. And I think both you and I have been in conversations with the executive committee as a whole, because they are a beautiful group and a set of people. But, you have very much the ones who are really working hard in that curriculum perspective space, our journal. And just even understanding the process that they go through is really it's awe-inspiring in some ways, because I just go, wow, the dedication and the amount of level of work that goes into publishing journals. And I think that's where it's really sad at the moment. We've got a bit of a discord, because there we have the most incredible researchers in Australia, and how do we get that into our classrooms? And acknowledging that, I think, is a beautiful way for us to say that, there's a lot of space and there's a lot of potential for us to be in a really great space. Now, you have mentioned a little bit of this before, but we always end the podcast with a really important question. And most people find this very difficult, actually. It's probably the most difficult question. But do you remember your favorite teacher, and can you give us a little reason why?
Yeah, I do. Look, she could like, I'm going to send this to her after it's recorded. Her name was Miss Burns.
Yes.
And she was the secondary teacher that I mentioned. She taught me ancient history, which I didn't get to do. You couldn't do ancient history as a subject you chose until year 11 in my school context in Sydney, New South Wales. And so it was her. I had so much, and I still do, and I keep in touch from time to time. And that's the impact of the profession you kind of go into, and then you work with these people you were mentored by or so impacted by. But for me as an ancient history teacher, Anna, she was so knowledgeable. She just didn't teach though about the content, about Athens or Sparta, these amazing places that we love to learn. It was kind of this skill of critical thinking of how ideas can actually travel across time. She kind of taught us how ideas shape the world, from ancient democracy, like I said, to kind of having your say now. And really, she kind of also just modeled the many benefits of the profession of being passionate about something that you loved. And she'd delight in marking our student work and want us to give us quality feedback. She delighted in pushing us further. So much so that I remember doing like a big speech assessment. It was a speaking assessment, and to get in the A range, you had to memorize your content. You couldn't have any notes, okay?
Yes.
And so that comes kind of naturally with presenting. I guess I can see that now and why they were encouraging us to do that. And I had an ancient Roman artifact, so I got out my bed sheet from my mum, helped me. I pinned it. I got in the classroom to put my bed sheet on
Yeah.
and completely get into costume. And I think it's like I wanted to do that not only because I wanted to do well in the assessment, but because I wanted to show my teacher that I was engaging critically. She modeled that to me, and I wanted to reciprocate that in my learning process, right? And so really then thinking actually that learning and teaching's about kind of connecting the past, the present, the future, relationally, content wise, curriculum wise, of course. And so as a young man, not sure of himself in the world, as a teenager, as kind of an awkward teenager as I was, I had an adult then all of a sudden believe in me before I could even believe in myself. And that's given me confidence. I kept in touch, like I said, and that's the power of a teacher. That's the power of good curriculum that in a teacher's hands as well. And that's something that I continue to share, that those memories and that warmth and impact on me as well today.
Oh, she sounds wonderful. And I love the fact that she gave you license to do it the way you wanted to do, and to be the person you wanted and needed to be. And I think that's such a wonderful quality that someone can do that. And as you're saying, believing in you is one thing, but in making sure that you believe in yourself is something that is a difficult one. But if you can get that right, then you really are a beautiful teacher who is doing amazing things. So she sounds wonderful, and I can't, I love the fact that you're still in touch with her, and that's been a lifelong learning process that you've grown together with. And I'm sure she's probably learning lots from you too. So wonderful. Thank you, Alex. So everyone, that has been the most lovely conversation, and we are so lucky to have Alex on board, and we look forward to the future of ACSA under the guidership and leadership of some of our beautiful new members and our executive committee. So thank you very much, everyone.